In this section of my webpage on action planning, I've tried to set out the kinds of initial conditions I usually conform to when tutoring master's students at the beginning of their inquiry. What I tend to stress with every practitioner researcher is that they already have an enormous depth and extent of embodied knowledge. This is the knowledge that they express in their everyday professional practice, which has often been built up over years of reflection and action, and actually thinking very carefully often about the values they use to make sense of what they're doing, as well as giving meaning and purpose to the lives that they're living. What I do initially is listen very attentively to the kinds of descriptions of the context in which they're working. And also, I usually ask questions about the kinds of values that motivate them to do what they do. So if you're beginning as a master's student to undertake your action research, I would expect you to already be asking questions of the kind, how do I improve what I'm doing, almost on a daily basis. And what I stress is the importance of a form of inquiry, which I think everybody watching this will recognise that they're almost going through daily. And it certainly seems to be consistent with the work of John Dewey, the latter part of the 1800s, and certainly in the early 1900s, when he was actually working on a form of inquiry which I would say is very similar to this action reflection cycle, where you'll express concerns because your values are not being lived as fully as they can be. Your imaginations, often without conscious intent, but your imaginations start to work on what it might be to improve things. And you may come up with several ideas, but in action you will need to choose one of them to actually try it out, just to see if the actions that you engage in do actually lead to the kind of improvements you believe are possible. And as you're acting, what I do is stress the importance of gathering some data that will enable you to make a judgment on the effectiveness of your actions in relation to your values. And then the next phase is to actually evaluate how effective you've been in relation to your values, and to produce an account of your learning which is evidence-based and which you can actually share with others, so that they can help you to strengthen the validity of your account by asking you questions about its comprehensibility, possibly suggesting ways of strengthening this. They can actually suggest ways in which you might develop the evidential base of your account, so that your claims are actually as justifiable as they could be with the evidence that you present. People forming what we often call a validation group who respond to your accounts could also ask you to make public the kind of socio-cultural background which is influencing your actions and your writings, but which sometimes are taken for granted, that they're perhaps not made explicit. And in writing your explanation for your own learning, I do encourage you to actually bring in some understandings of the influences of the socio-cultural background in which you're working and living. And the fourth area, which often helps to strengthen the validity of your account, concerns the authenticity that you establish over time in interaction, as you show people that you're actually truly committed to living the values that you claim to hold as fully as possible. And that's the kind of action reflection cycle that you'll find in the appendix of this web page. And often people just fill these in and actually share them as a way of just making public their intentions and their commitments. And you'll see this on the web page in terms of that action reflection cycle. You'll also see what is called the tusk wheel. And this is about thinking actively in a social context. And it was actually designed by Bell Wallace after some 19 years of working at the University of KwaZulu-Natal in South Africa. And again, many teachers are finding the action reflection cycle in the task wheel most helpful in getting their inquiries underway, not only for themselves, but also with the pupils and the young people they teach. On the webpage, you'll also find an emphasis towards the end on the use of visual narratives. This is the idea that your visual data on your practice, often from video, can be very helpful indeed in communicating and sharing the meanings of the embodied values and the energy that you express in what you're doing. In many text-based accounts, it is often difficult to communicate the meanings of this flow of energy, which I often call life-affirming energy, with the values that you use in their embodied expression to give meaning and purpose to your life. And these can form the practical principles in explanations of your influence, both in your own learning and the learning of others. So you'll see that I've stressed the importance of developing these visual narratives in this section of the website. I do hope you find this helpful because there has been an international continuing professional development project established, which you're most welcome to participate in. And I've put details up towards the end of this webpage that you can actually access and join in this international project. And you might also follow up the writings from Joan Walton, who is the director of the Centre for the Child, Family and Society at Liverpool Hope University, in two of her publications, where she actually describes it is a cooperative inquiry. And the only other thing I'll mention here is the use of video in a process that I've been calling empathetic resonance, in which you move a cursor backwards and forwards along a videotape to see the points, to see the moments that actually resonate as fully as possible with your own values and energy, and the consistency with which a language can be used to communicate the meanings of these expressions. And I've used a video clip from Moira Laidlaw's classroom in China to illustrate how this works. You could also access Marie Huxtable's paper from Research Intelligence, a publication of the British Education Research Association, where she actually describes this process and how it works, using video clips and the movement of the cursor to communicate our meanings. So I do hope you find this section on the action reflection process and action planning helpful in your own inquiry.